You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. In this episode, I don't need to get into too much how bad of a manager Pedro is, right? I think I've hit that nail with the hammer multiple times over the last couple of episodes. I mean, I'm trying my hardest not to celebrate injury, but Andrew Vaughn being injured and Andrew Benintendi to the IL forced him to play guys that should have been in the lineup. And then you see Dominic Fletcher go over the wall to pull a ball back. And you see opportunities for Fletcher and Colas and more for Corey Jokes. And just there's more opportunity for the guys you want to give opportunities. And you're kind of hoping Martin Maldonado gets a hangnail or something so that Corey Lee can get more playing time as well behind the plate. So, it's unfortunate that that's what you have to almost root for now. Is that, oh, gosh, I just wish this guy who's hitting under 200 would get hurt. Not seriously hurt. Not something like, I'm not wishing pain upon another human being, but just something that's inconvenient enough that it forces the manager to play the proper player and put together a workable lineup. Look at all the new players that showed up on the team on Tuesday before the series against the Cubs begins. You got Zach Remillard DFA'd because you got to add Duke Ellis to the team. You're adding him for stolen bases, not for anything else, but good for that kid. He was really excited pregame. You could tell he was shocked he was even in the show. That's awesome. Tommy Pham's injured. He hurt himself going into home plate against the Brewers right before he exploded. We'll get into that. Another reason why he was probably upset, on top of a few other reasons, is because he had a left ankle sprain and he probably felt it. Dominic Fletcher hurt himself going over the wall, so he's also on the 10-day IL. Luis Robert Jr. is back. Zach DeLoach comes back from Charlotte. So armed with all of that, what does Pedro do? Well, Andrew Vaughn is better. So stick him back there in the 2 spot and put Gavin Sheets, a first baseman, out in right field at Wrigley Field. Don't take your best catcher and have him catch. Put Martin Maldonado in there. Have Corey Lee DH, and don't play some of these guys that just got here because you're using both catchers in the same game. He will always be perplexing. What is not perplexing is Cork and Carry at the Park, 33rd and Princeton, shadow of the ballpark, the proud sponsor of Sox in the Basement. Get out there, get the whole family out there, have a great time pregame, get out there postgame for the party, win or lose. An incredible selection of craft beers, familiar favorites, spirits and wines, award-winning burgers, great pricing, amazing service. They are your home for pregame, postgame, in-game viewing parties of the White Sox, the proud sponsor of Sox in the Basement. See more at corkandcarry.com. I don't know if another manager can make them much better. Like, they're a bad team, but, you lose this many games. What do you got right now? You've won 15 and you've lost 45 in your first 60 or something along those lines. Like, I don't understand how he still has a job. I'm never going to understand it. Tommy Pham doesn't understand it. That was really obvious. Tommy Pham, in the middle of his really scary response to that play at the plate against the Brewers, where John Schriffen went way overboard. And he continues to make it very hard on me to objectively say the boys club in Chicago media doesn't like an outsider while still listening to a guy overreact so many times in so many games to things like he just doesn't get what's really going on. Like, you're a bad team. That was a bad send. And William Contreras is just a little happy with making a good play. And you just lose your mind over the thing, and I don't get it. And Tommy Pham, honestly, buddy, I love you. You're a hell of a ball player. I love the fire, and I don't want to say anything bad about you because you might come over to my house and punch me in the face. But I don't understand why you're so angry either. The only thing I took from his post-game comments where he's swearing and talking about beating people up, essentially, is that he really didn't like being sent home. That he was like, that left fielder's shallow. I should have been thrown out. I was out by a mile, but I just am not going to ignore what a third base coach tells me to do. That is yet another player in that locker room calling out the guys that are making decisions, the coaching staff, the manager.
Yeah, and I don't see Tommy Pham getting mad at a major league catcher. He's been in this game a long enough time that, if you're going to be in a play at the plate and the catcher comes out on top, they're going to celebrate. And I don't think Tommy Pham's sitting there looking at William Contreras going, "How dare you, sir? How dare you besmirch my good name in front of all of these thousands of fans?"
No, he's pissed at his coaches, and then he just has this guy in front of him, so he unloads on him, right? And then words are probably exchanged. I bet you he goes home and he sits there and he says to himself, "Man, I was really actually more mad at the coach for sending me home. I'm really tired of this ticky-tack operation. I don't understand how this guy is still the manager. I can't wait to be traded. Trade me right now."
In the moment, yes, you can be upset with Contreras. In the moment, when you're upset at the entire play, you'll lash out at whoever's in front of you. And even in the postgame, he might still be sitting there. I mean, maybe Contreras said something to him. Maybe one of the Brewers said something that hasn't really come out. But I think he's just upset in general in that situation. He's mad because he's a competitor. He's mad because it was a bad play. He's mad because he's in the business of Tommy Pham, as we've pointed out.
I love the business of Tommy Pham. I love it.
Me too. But he doesn't need to be getting hurt at a meaningless play in the plate for a team that is, as you pointed out, so far below 500 at this point. It's historic. It's that bad that we're using history on it. And John Schifrin gets way out over his skis with it. But even at this point, I don't know that there's any reason to defend him or not defend him. I also wonder, does the new network coming up, do they hit the reset button entirely? When they hit the 2025
Well, it all depends on what the PR department's been instructed to do by the miser. Because look, the miser runs everything. The miser who claims that he wants to win runs everything. And then the PR department is the arm that goes out there and tells the peons, the fans, what they should think and shames them for thinking anything that's against the company line. And John Schifrin was clearly hired to speak the company line. All right. I mean, look, I've been in media interviews before. I've gone into radio stations before. Sometimes you sit there and they're trying to tell you, like, look, we want you to have a personality, but we want you to have this personality. We're looking for somebody that's going to do this, that's going to say these kind of things and have this opinion. And we want to keep you in a box. Sometimes you walked out of those interviews as a broadcaster and said, this is not what I want. I would imagine that some of the candidates that they would have had throughout the process probably heard what they needed, which is total positivity at all times and a push for you to come and spend your dollars in the ballpark, no matter how bad things were, and no negativity whatsoever. Like saying things like, I think we're losing because we're running in the teams at just the worst time when they're hot. And then Steve Stone just giggles because he's like, that's absurd. Like, I know you're supposed to say it, John. I know they told you to say it, John, but I can't believe you said it. Like, he's laughing at him when he says that kind of stuff. So, I mean, like, he's the perfect guy for what the PR department wants to do. He does get picked on because he's an outsider. That still exists. He's getting picked on because he's an outsider. Some of the things that people have done are cheap shots. They should have just sat back and waited for this instead of going after him for mispronouncing somebody's name, right? Mispronouncing the Vec name when you're not from Chicago was probably not the hill to die on. This is more funny. Like this stuff that he's doing now, I get it now. Now laugh your butt off at him. Because, he wants to be positive, and I know there's a section of the fan base that just wants nothing but positivity. But even Hawk Harrelson didn't do this. Even Hawk would start saying things about the team. I mean, he was a nothing but a homer. And he'd be sitting there going, well, we don't have enough guys with TW. What's that, Hawk? The will to win. Remember, that's where that came from. He was mad at players. He wasn't being positive when he came up with TW.
No, and the idea of being grindy, the idea of being, all the Hawkisms and everything like that. Where he was a homer was when he would get mad at an umpire. What are you doing, Wegner? And then disappear for 3 innings because he's muttering to himself and swearing. I mean, that was where Hawk was over the line. What Schifrin's doing, you're right. I mean, and we talked about the whole Bill Veeck thing and about how there are guys in Schifrin's ear who need to give him a pronunciation guide, who need to prep him for that, especially because it sounded like it was pre-recorded. There's some producer who screwed that up for him as well.
Yeah, but you're not screwing up this. This is him. This is what he's been instructed to do. And when you're making comments like, we're just running into teams at the wrong time, you're getting Steve Stone to laugh, and Steve Stone knows how this job works. And he's sitting there laughing because, remember, Steve Stone sat next to Harry Carey. The exact opposite of John Schifrin is Harry Carey.
Yeah.
He's the he has now seen the entire spectrum of broadcasters, where you have a guy like Harry who'd be like, these guys suck, pour me a beer. And you have this guy over here who makes an excuse for everything. And it boggles his mind that the team is bad. How are all these moves that Pedro's making not working? How is Andrew Vaughn not hitting 300? This is mind-boggling to me. Sox in the Basement listeners, switch to a new age of life for mom and dad, grandma and grandpa. Keep them out of assisted living. Make it so they can get around on their own, live independently, stay in their home. Hyatt Home Medical Equipment wants to help you with that with stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. They're going to work with your insurance. They have 0% financing for qualified individuals, and they have a big, beautiful showroom with testing rooms for the CPAP machines. Are you unhappy with your CPAP machine vendor? Switch now, get supplies directly mailed to you, and test it out in their testing rooms. They also have the latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors. See more about Hyatt Home Medical Equipment right here on the South Side at hhme.com. I mentioned Andrew Vaughn. Couple of hits, actually. First game of the Cubs series. By the way, great stat that I want to put out there today for you, and I want to get into some other stuff. We have Spencer Torkelson, #1 overall pick in 2020, and over 1,318 plate appearances in the major leagues. A slash line of 218 average, 296 on base percentage, 386 slugging, a negative 1.1 B WAR in 2024, and a 597 OPS. He was optioned to AAA in the last 48 hours by the Detroit Tigers. Andrew Vaughn, #3 overall pick in 2019, very comparable players, played the same position. 249, little better average, 309 on base percentage, and 407 slugging. He's only a couple points higher than Torkelson in basically all those stats. He had 1,859 plate appearances, and he only has hit 14 more home runs. He's had over 500 more plate appearances, more time than Torkelson, and has only been able to produce 14 additional home runs in his time in the majors. This year, a negative B WAR of 0.7, and his OPS is 20 points lower than Torkelson at a 577. He remains unoptioned to AAA today.
And, think about this too. Spencer Torkelson plays in Comerica, where that park is not homer friendly and never has been since they opened it. And Andrew Vaughn plays in a park that is largely regarded as being a park that's easy to hit home runs out of, and he's had more opportunity, only hit 14 more. He's done some things, I suppose, to give you a spark, a little shot. Every time we talk bad about him, he seems to go out and hit a home run the opposite way in a meaningless game. But he's just not shown that he can consistently develop into a 20 to 30 home run guy who's going to hit for a decent enough average, who's going to then hit enough doubles to justify being the first baseman on a major league team. You either got to hit for a lot of average if you're going to play first, or you got to hit for a lot of power, and he's doing neither at the moment, and Torkelson's doing neither. So the Detroit Tigers, who are run like an actual organization, believe it or not, yeah, they moved on.
Yeah, they did. They moved on. And Major League Baseball moved on from a player for life. I want to get to this before we talk Cubs Sox and we talk about the new network, because I love the story that came out on Tuesday. Several Major League Baseball players suspended for gambling on Major League Baseball games, and one Major League Baseball player banned for life. Major League Baseball had kind of led into it 24 hours in advance, saying that some of these guys were under investigation for betting on baseball. And then Tucupita Marcano on Tuesday is thrown out of baseball for life after placing 231 Major League Baseball bets, including 25 bets on the Pirates when he was on their injured list playing for them. Now, here's the amazing thing. Out of 231 Major League Baseball bets, Ed, he only won 4.3% of his bets.
Oh, no.
Dumb. You're dumb.
Yeah.
That is astounding to me. Then you have a couple of players that were suspended for a year. I mean, one of them's Popeye Rodriguez, who was with the White Sox at the time. He bet $749.09. How do you spend? He must just be rolling things over. Okay, on baseball.
Clearly, yeah. Nobody throws down. I got a nickel and 4 pennies. What can I get for that?
He spent about $750 in bets. He's out for a year. Jay Groom's out for about $450 worth of MLB bets. Michael Kelly, he is out of Major League Baseball for a year. He spent just under $100 on Major League Baseball bets, an average of $9.92 per bet. So he was a small bettor. And Andrew Selfrank, $445 on baseball. Now, I think there's far more players that are betting in baseball. I think umpires are betting on games. I think referees are betting on games. I think all these officials in all these sports are betting on games. I think all these players are betting on games. I would be shocked if it wasn't rampant. I think for finding 5 guys, you've got 500 more that you haven't found yet. The fact that you can just go on your phone or you can have a buddy place a bet, and some of these bets that you can find on like FanDuel or something like that, and I'm just picking one, so I don't know if they have this specific bet, but I've seen bets before where it's like over under a hit and a half for this guy tonight. So you're telling me that guy knows that if he can get his buddy to go make a bet for him on a phone and he can't have 2 hits in that game and he can drop some coin to make some money, that guys aren't doing that? Give me a break. To me, the betting is rampant, and this is just scratching the surface. And personally, as somebody who once lived in Nevada when it was the only state where you could actually bet, especially on sports games, and was exposed to it in a more traditional sense, I learned very early on that most of these bets are sucker bets. That's why I don't do them. That's why I really don't bet on games. That's why I avoid them. That's why I wait for something that's so egregious in a line, and I go, okay, well, maybe this one for fun, I'll throw some money in. But I think if you look, 99% of people that bet on sports, if they're really honest with themselves, they've lost over a period of time, or they basically broke even. And for the stress, what did they really spend all that money on? It seems crazy to me, but it's the way that things are these days. Everybody loves to bet on games. It's not my thing, but everybody loves to do it. But on top of the stupidity of throwing away essentially your career, because these other guys, they're out for a year. I don't know, man. Some of these guys are developing right now in the minors. They're never going to get a chance, right? This killed them. But after that stupidity and Tucupita Marcano losing his baseball career over that little amount of money, and he didn't win anything, he lost it. Then you see Shohei Ohtani's news break an hour later. Major League Baseball chose to show you that they are going to slam these lesser players and throw one of them out of baseball. And like an hour or so later, it comes out they've completed their Shohei investigation. He's cleared on all charges. I thought that timing was interesting.
Oh, interesting, huh? Yeah. That's a word. That's a choice of words you could use to say that.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yes, fascinating.
You're the biggest player in baseball with a possible gambling scandal. And we've completed that investigation, and you announce that you've completed it and cleared him an hour after you throw somebody out of baseball and a bunch of lesser peons are suspended for a year.
Yeah, I mean, poor Oakland A's reliever Michael Kelly, who clearly was on the same budget that the A's are on when he was making bets. I mean, only $9.92 a bet.
Yeah. He had a net win of $28.30 over all of his bets.
Yeah, you look at these things and you sit there and go, you're right. All the prop bets, all the little things you can do. A lot of people who are gamblers are really, it's a hobby for them, right? They throw their money towards that the way, some people throw their money towards, being snooty about craft beer. I mean, it's just, it's a way to do things that, they like the stress, they like the action, they like what happens, but they know, you're right. They probably know that they are going to lose more often than they win. When they do win, when they are able to break even, when they are able to pull a little bit of money out of it, that's a bonus for them, right? But I always question when you're a major league athlete, when you're involved in the game, unless you're going to go big, okay, why bother to go at all? Because you're right. I mean, you can sit here and look at it and say, okay, what Pete Rose did, now apparently what Tucupita Marcano did, I don't know that he's the Pete Rose of our era because
he's Pete Rose without the hits and the accomplishments.
I was going to say he's probably got enough hits in his major league career to fill Pete Rose's stat sheet for a weekend if there was a doubleheader, maybe. But, the guys, the names that you read off, Jay Groom, okay, sort of a fading prospect. Jose Rodriguez, who was with the White Sox, who was, kind of a fading prospect. I have no idea who Andrew Salfrank is, but he's got an extra A in his name. Maybe he should have gambled that away instead of actual money. So there's a lot of things that go into this. And you're right, it probably is really, really rampant. But the idea is very clearly here that by giving out suspensions for guys that clearly were dumb enough to get caught, that were low stakes guys, that were guys who probably didn't think that this was ever going to come to anything because it was just not flashy enough to really, I'm sure in a lot of people's minds, fly above the radar, they can show that they are taking it seriously, which means that whatever they've decided with Shohei Ohtani is very clearly the right decision because there has been some investigation. There's been some discussion.
But doesn't it just seem like, and look, I think you're crazy if you don't think that everybody's betting. I think you're nuts if you don't think everybody's betting. You see things on a football field sometimes where you go, huh? You see some of these really weird calls by umpires sometimes and you go, I know they're blind, but that's pretty blatant. You see decisions that are made in games at every level. And it feels to me like how you felt it was weird that Sammy Sosa, who used to be a White Sox player, went to the Cubs and went 3 sizes bigger and all of a sudden was hitting nearly 70 home runs. And you thought it was weird and you thought something was off. And you started hearing about guys taking supplements and you're like, And it feels like that with the gambling thing. And it feels like Major League Baseball was like, all right, we've got a major scandal about to break here and we cannot just clear him and keep credibility. Who do we know that we're sure is gambling and it doesn't matter? Because none of these guys matter. Tucupita Marcano went back and forth from the Padres and the Pirates so many times. He had maxed out his frequent flyer miles. He was traded back and forth. This is a guy who never really became what they always wanted him to be. He's not that good of a player. Okay,
he's become depth.
Right,
he's a quad A player. You know
what you have with these players is nobody important really being caught for minuscule amounts of money because they really never made any money. And then Major League Baseball goes, see, we caught somebody and we threw a guy out of baseball for life. And I don't believe these are the only guys that are doing it. And I don't think Major League Baseball believes it either. But they don't want to break this scandal, just like they didn't want to break the steroid thing. See, Major League Baseball has a credibility problem with me because they knew what was going on with the steroid thing. And it might have been a different commissioner, but it's the same owners running the same game, all looking at profit. There's a Jerry Reinsdorf in every building. They just take a different iteration. I don't trust them with this because I see this game that was played. Here's a bunch of people that you probably never heard of. We caught them. We don't think there's any other gambling going on throughout Major League Baseball. And definitely Shohei Ohtani, the game's biggest star, didn't do anything.
This is one of those things, too, where, remember, when Pete Rose was doing this, the gambling had to be done through spurious means, right? Yeah, you had to have some shady figures involved to really make this work for him. And now it's an app that you download, and you just try and mask it as best you can, or you have friends make the bets for you, like you said. I mean, the idea of gambling on sports is so prevalent and so readily available that it would be foolish to sit there and think that this is not rampant across the game. And it could be in the umpires, it could be in the managers, it could be, and I don't want to feed into conspiracy theories about why Angel Hernandez just decided to retire or why Pedro Grifol seems to be unable to win a game. There's a lot of things that you can sit there and look at though and go, well, that was weird, right? But more to the point is it's an easy thing to do. When I said people make it a hobby, that's why. It's an easy thing to do. It's a hobby situation now because it's not involving Vegas. It's not involving finding a guy in a dark alley somewhere to hand off some cash who's going to come after you if you don't make good on your bet. You can just do it anywhere and everywhere on every sport, on anything. And it doesn't even have to be on the games itself. Like you said, you can bet, you can sit there and say, Tucupita Marcano could have placed a bet on himself to go 1 for 4 instead of 2 for 4, and nobody would have been any the wiser because chances of him going 0 for 4 were seemingly, high odds anyway, right? So you can do that. And I'm not saying that that's what he did because I don't know. And I don't want to cast aspersions where aspersions already cast.
It doesn't sound like anybody did anything that egregious. And that's what I find laughable because it's happening.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that it's there. And you drew a good corollary with the steroids because we were watching guys. Ken Caminiti was another guy, right? He was a defensive whiz at third base, but couldn't hit the ball out of the infield. It felt like he just didn't have any power. And all of a sudden, he had a ton of power. Brady Anderson was another guy that was tagged.
Brady Anderson, he went from 2 home runs to 50 and back to 2 when they started looking into guys. Remember that?
Yeah.
It was crazy. It was the thing. As fans, you had a feeling something was going on. And And they knew. I mean, all the investigations show that Major League Baseball knew. And so that was my first thought when I saw these meaningless players. I mean, I'm sorry. These are not important players. These are guys that, again, you're just like, oh, they caught some guys gambling. Well, I guess they're keeping the sport clean. No, they're not. Like, I don't believe that nobody that of any importance is gambling. And I don't know if Shohei did it or not. It really could be his interpreter was given his bank account information and allowed to take money out at will because he trusted the guy so much. I don't believe that, but it could be that. It's funny to see this list of names and that Tucupita Marcano is going to be the face of them saying, you see, if you gamble, you'll be thrown out of baseball just like your shoeless Joe Jackson. Yeah, this is the new Kennesaw Martin Landis standing there and he's just dropping a hammer on people, right? I don't believe it because you sent somebody to the guillotine that I've never heard of. And that's what I find funny.
Literally, you have to be a Pirates or Padres superfan to have ever heard this guy's name before. And the rest of the guys too. It's a bunch of inconsequential lambs to the slaughter so that the guy that the big sheep in the room doesn't get sheared.
Right.
You like that metaphor or was that bad?
Before we get out of here, I do want your thoughts on this new network that Jerry Reinsdorf will be using to push out all the propaganda he can possibly push out. The thing I like about the new network announcement that will not really affect the White Sox until next season, I like the streaming thing. Because people have sat there and said, well, do you really want to pay Jerry for streaming? And honestly, folks, I got rid of my YouTube TV and I go up to local bars or hang out at Dad's house when I want to watch a White Sox game because they're so bad. They're so terrible.
Right.
I'm like, because everything else that I want is on streaming. And I don't want to spend $70 a month for the White Sox. And it's not going to be $70 a month to pay this channel. And if me paying him directly gives him more money so he can half-ass trying to run a team, but maybe we increase the payroll a little bit, all right, fine. Like, to me, I'm excited about the possibility of streaming. I don't like the idea that I got to have a cable package to watch the White Sox. So that was exciting to me. I'm very curious as to whether or not they will change anybody. I don't think anybody of importance, the people that you listen to on the air, I think all those people deep down in the end are hand-selected by Jerry Reinsdorf. And I think that's going to be proven when you see them all magically move from one network to another.
Well, and there's talk about there being an over-the-air component too for this and being able to pick up broadcast channels, just through digital over-the-air signals, which again seems old school and analog and kind of like, well, why would you bother doing that? But in a cord-cutting environment, that's actually really, really kind of a smart way to go if he does follow through on that and if you can pick it up without a cable package, because that means that, even if you can't get the streaming component done because of MLB rules, because of the blackouts and stuff that still exist there, we could be in a situation where, as White Sox fans, we are able just to go and get an antenna and a converter box for an old TV and throw it out there and get some staticky White Sox games. And frankly, I would watch the White Sox with a jumping picture because it'd be more fun to try and figure out who's doing what badly than to actually see who's doing what badly. Because then you and I would sit here and go, well, I think it was Andrew Vaughn, but the vertical hold on my TV was so bad that it might have been Gavin Sheets at first. I really just couldn't tell you. And it was so staticky, I couldn't hear what Schifrin was saying. I just know he was pissed off about something.
Right. And if it was over the air, and I could use an antenna for it, then I could match it up with the radio, like how you used to do in the old days, right? When you were sitting around watching the Sox and the Cubs play that one-game exhibition that didn't actually count in the late 80s and they both sucked, kind of like now, but the games count. And people all get online and they'll all say terrible things to each other and they'll all try to say that their crappy team is better than the other person's crappy team. And what Cubs fans don't understand is that White Sox fans are angrier at their team than they could ever be. Like, your team sucks. Yeah, it does. Totally sucks. Let me tell you why it sucks. Like, that's how a White Sox fan is going to react to that during all these crosstown games. But it would be like that. It would be like old school where I could watch it with the rabbit ears and then I could just not have to listen to the TV broadcast and I could pop on Len Casper.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.